Introing the Django framework, which is yet another framework. So again, if you guys are in Flask, you should probably be finishing up with Flask today. And again, if you guys haven't done Ninja Gold in Flask, go ahead and skip it because you'll get a chance to do Ninja Gold in Django. All right? Cool. So let's talk about how we can use this new framework. So the first thing that we want to do with any of our projects is we always want to get our environment going, right? We either want to activate it if we already have that environment, or we want to create that environment fresh. All right? So how do I create a new environment? Because I'm going to create a Django one. Whoops. What happened there? You guys remember how to create an environment?
In the terminal, like call source or activate your Python or
Okay, so the source would activate it, but I'm going to create one from scratch because right now we're just starting with Django. Python 3, venv, and then the name of the environment, so we're just going to call it Django because we're creative like that. Then I need to activate this guy, right? So this is where source comes in. So we're going to say source Django bin/activate. And again, if you guys are on Windows, these commands will be a little bit different depending on which terminal you're using. All right. We're going to do that in a minute. Yeah, I just haven't done it yet. Okay, so we've activated this environment. Now we need to install Django as our dependency, right? So how do I do that? Pip install Django. Yeah, I think we're going to go with 2.2. So notice I'm going to do this double equal sign here. That's saying what version do I want.
So if I have 3 installed, should I uninstall 3 and get 2.2?
I'm not sure if there were any breaking. I mean, I know there were some breaking changes in version 3, but I'm not sure if it breaks any of the functionality that we're working with. I mean, just to be safe, you could do it. You could do pip uninstall Django, and then you could reinstall it like this. Yeah. Okay, great. So now, oh, it's still going. Okay, so now that we've got our environment activated, what I want to do is I want to start a new project in Django. So I'm going to go to my assignments folder, or actually my lectures folder. Lectures. Okay. And then since our environment is activated, we're going to have access to something because we just installed Django. We're going to have access to something called a CLI. Has anyone heard of that before? Command line interface. Okay? So what that's going to do is going to give us some nice functionality where we can use Django that we just installed to scaffold an app for us, sort of build out the skeleton for it. All right? The way that we're going to do that, I'm trying to make this big enough. Can you guys see this okay? No? Bigger still? There we go. It's pretty big, right? Okay, cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this command, Django admin, and then I'm going to say start project. Okay? This is going to create the folder and the basic sketch for the actual Django app. So now I can just call it whatever I want. Let's say we're just going to call this Hello Django. Okay? Now what I want to do is I actually want to open this in my editor, in VS Code. So I can say code Hello Django. And if you guys have any problems doing the code Hello Django, let me know. But sometimes you have to make a small little change in your VS Code to make that work. All right.
So you said it before, but these are terminologies maybe different on this.
The code part you should be able to do still. It's not working? Okay. Yeah, find me later, and I'll try to help you get that set up. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to close out of this terminal right here because I'm basically done with that. I've got this new window in VS Code that's opened up for me. Now check this out. It's created this folder for me inside called Hello Django. I also have a file inside there called manage.py. So let's look inside this Hello Django folder. Notice we've got a settings.py, a urls.py, and then this whizkey.py, which we're really not going to touch that file for now. Okay? We're going to be concerned mainly with our settings.py and our urls.py. Cool. All right. Now, one thing that can be a little bit confusing about this is that this folder, this subfolder, has the exact same name as our project. All right. So I've got, on the outside, I've got this folder called Hello Django, and then inside that I have another folder called Hello Django. It's the inner folder that has our settings.py and our urls.py. Okay? All right. So the first thing that we're going to do once we get this basic app scaffolded like this is we're going to go inside our terminal. Wait, what happened? What happened to my environment? Why not?
Because it's a different term.
It's a different terminal, right? So I'm actually going to need to reactivate that if I want to run my project. So that kind of sucks. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say source. I'm going to go up a couple levels. Let me make this bigger. Up a couple levels into my environments. And then Django bin activate. Okay, now we're activated, so we're good to go. This part can be a little bit tricky, you know, like knowing how the directory structure on your computer looks, visualizing that so that I know I need to go up a couple levels and then get into my environments and then go activate this. Because the thing is, you're generally going to have to come back to wherever your project is to actually run it. So notice how I didn't actually traverse up there. I simply activated it from where I was. Now I'm right back where I need to be. Okay? This is sure to trip some of you guys up, traversing around your directory structure. So be careful with that. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create an application inside of this directory that we have right now. So right now, again, we've got our project directory, and I'm going to create an app. So Django has this concept of multiple applications. We can have one project that has more than one application. Okay? So in order for us to create an application, we have to say Python, and then we're going to use this file right here, this manage.py. So I'm going to say manage.py. And then I'm going to say start app. That means I want to create an application. And then after that, I'm going to say, what do I want the name of the application to be? I always call mine main. You can call yours something else if you like. But notice how it just created a new folder for us up in here. Nice, right? So you can see Django's already doing a lot of the work for us here. It's allowing us to create these things quite easily. So if I open up this folder, I've got a bunch of different files inside of it. So I've got a views file. That one's going to be something that we'll be working with. I also have a models file. Can anyone guess maybe what that models.py is going to be for?
Storage of data, like the dictionaries and things.
Okay, good. It's going to be what we're going to use to interact with our database. Okay. All right, so we're not there yet, obviously. We're not going to be doing anything with the database today, but we'll eventually get to that point. All right. Now that we've created this main application, what I want to do is I want to add it to my settings.py. So let's go up in here, go to our settings.py, and then down here, oops, just close out that side window. Notice that we've got this list here of installed apps. Okay? And these are the ones that are installed by default. We're basically not going to use any of these. We're just going to add our own app that we just created to that list. So just come back up here to the top of the list and then just put in main. Okay, that's the name of our application. Cool. Now the other thing that we need to do is we need to go to our urls.py. You can see that that's this file right here. Again, let me close that side one. And if you scroll down here, you can see that we're importing this admin app. So this is one that is installed by default when you create a new Django project. We're not going to be using that, so I'm just going to comment it out. Okay. And I'm also going to comment it out down here because this is a specific, this is where we're actually using the admin app. But we're not going to use it right now. So let's just comment it out. Now what I need to do is I need to route my URLs to this new app that I just created, right? So let's see what we have. We imported, and this stuff will automatically be there for you guys. You guys don't have to actually import path. It will already be imported, right? Okay. We imported this function called path, and I'm going to go down here inside my URL patterns list, and I'm going to invoke this path function. Okay. All right, and you can see that when I invoke the path function, I need to pass it a couple different things. I need to pass it the path, the actual path, and then as the second argument, I need to give it some kind of something. All right, so we'll get to that in a second. So for the path, I'm going to say, we're just going to start with an empty path. This would be my index path, right? And then I'm going to import one other function here from Django utils. It's this function called include. Okay, and what include's going to allow us to do, it's going to allow us to grab the code that's in our main application that we just created and use that to handle all URLs that are just empty, that start with sort of an empty path. Okay? So let's go down here and we'll say include. Oops. This is a function as well, so I need to invoke it. And what I'm going to invoke this against is main.urls. Okay? Meaning that I want to go into my main app, and then I want to grab my URLs file. We don't have that yet, though, right? We haven't created a URLs file inside the main application. So we've got to do that. So let's go inside here. I've got my main folder, and I'm just going to create this file called urls.py. Okay? Now, one thing that we're going to need inside our second urls.py is going to be this path function again. I still need that. So what you guys can do is you can just copy this guy right here, the import path part, go into our new urls.py that we just created and paste that in. So there are two urls.py going on here. This is the one that's housed under the Hello Django folder. Okay? And I'm just grabbing that import statement because I'm going to need this function, this path function, inside this other urls.py that I just created. This is the part that's like kind of the most confusing, is that we're going to have two urls.py. Okay? So there's routing going on the project level, and then there's routing also going on the application level. So it's kind of two levels of routing. So back here, I'm going to again create a variable called URL patterns. And again, this is just going to be a list, right? So each element in the list, I'm going to invoke this path function. Now we need to decide what path do we want this URL to be. If I do a blank string or an empty string like that, it means that's going to be the index route. Okay? Index route. Now the second argument that we need to pass to this function is, what is the function that we want to handle our index route? Okay? Have we written a function for that yet? No, we're not going to use include in this particular file. We used it in the project-wide URLs.py, but we won't use it here. Okay? But have I written a function to handle my index route yet?
No.
Not yet, right?
Dot app route, and then define whatever function it's gonna take.
Yeah, so let's talk about where that function is going to go. It's going to go inside this views.py file. All right? So right now you can see there's basically nothing in there. We're importing a function called render. Okay, that should seem kind of familiar to you guys. What does that sound like? We'll be able to use that to render a template. So that's cool. All right. Let's create this index function that's just going to handle the index route. So we'll say def index. And here's one of the differences with Django is that for all of our route handler functions that we create, we also need to take in the request itself. Okay, so that was different from Flask. In Flask, remember we imported request at the top. So your function is going to take in the request, and then let's say I just want to return out some HTTP response. I can also import that up here, so I can say HTTP response, and I can return it out. So HTTP response will just stay as a string, hello from Django. Okay. Yeah. Now don't worry too much about this HTTP response. We're basically never going to use it. I'm just going to show it to you guys for kicks. All right, so here inside of our urls.py, how do I get access to that function that I just wrote that was inside the views.py?
So say your main dot index, you would call the function.
So I need to import it first, right? So I can say something like this, from dot, meaning from the current directory that I'm in, let me import my views. Okay. So what that means is that let's look in the current directory that we're in. So right now we're in my main app folder, and inside there I've got this views.py. That's what I want to import. Okay. So now that I've imported my views, I can refer to a specific function that was in my views.py to handle this index route. So I can say views.index. Okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to come over here and invoke this function here that's in our views.py. Right? So all we're doing is we're importing this from our urls.py, and then this function is going to get invoked whenever a person hits the index route of our application. Any questions on this part before we move on?
You might be your own dot.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, notice that these two files are in the exact same directory. And that allowed us to do this where we said, from the current directory that we're in, let's import views. That's what that dot means, this current directory.
Can we do render? Can we import renders in the URLs file?
You're not going to want to do that. You're only going to want render here inside views.py, because this is where all your logic is going to go that's sort of handling each individual route. Notice how here things have become a little bit more modular. We have one file that's just concerned with our URLs, right? And then we have another file which is going to have all of our logic for handling each one of those routes. So we're sort of splitting things out a little bit more than we were in Flask. All right, so let's actually get this project running. So down here, if I want to run the project, I can say Python manage.py run server. Okay, and this is giving us that sort of hot reloading that we got used to in Flask as well, meaning that if I make a change to one or more files in my project, it should be reflected right away when I refresh my web browser. Okay, so let's open this up. It should say here that we're running on port 8000, I think. Yeah, so you can see right here. Notice here it says starting development server here on port 8000, so we can open that up in our browser and check it out. Localhost 8000. So there we go. Kind of took a lot just to return out a response, right? So it's a little bit more involved on the front side, but you guys will start to appreciate this a little bit more once we start dealing with the database and the data side of things. We'll get some very nice functionality there. But it's a little more work just to get a project up and running. Okay. So that's nice, but do I really want to kind of return out responses this way? An HTTP response where I'm just returning a string? Kind of yucky, right? I mean, that would be terrible if we had to write some big long string of text just to put together an HTML file to give back to the browser. So how can we change that? Well, lo and behold, Django also looks for a folder called templates where we can put our HTML templates. Yeah, pretty cool.
Make those things, but it doesn't want to.
Yeah. Wait, say that again? Oh, it didn't actually create that directory for us? Yeah, come on, Django. Well, maybe I just want to return a bunch of HTTP responses, right? Maybe I didn't need that folder. All right, so let's put something inside of our templates folder. We'll just make an index.html. And again, if you guys want to put in some boilerplate HTML, just exclamation point and tab, and that'll do it for you. So I'll put a little h1 in here, and we'll say hello from hi, Django. Okay. So now let's go back to this views.py. Instead of sending this HTTP response, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. We won't need that. And we're going to return the render an invocation of the render function. So let's say render. Now, one thing that's a little bit different with Django is that when you render, you have to pass the request as the first argument there. Okay? So notice how here the function is taking in the request, and then when we render, we also need to pass that in to the render function. Right? That's bound to maybe trip up some of you guys, so just take note of that. Then the second argument that we're going to provide is just going to be what is the template that we're trying to render. Okay? So here we're just rendering our index.html. And then let's refresh the page. Let's see if we're getting that. Cool. Hi, Django. So now we're actually seeing our HTML template, right? Okay, cool. What if I wanted to pass some data along to that template? That's something that you guys are going to often do. Here's how we'll do it. Whereas in Flask, we would create sort of those individual variables that we wanted our template to have access to. In Django, we're going to create a dictionary, what we like to call a context dictionary. So I'll say context. I'm going to make a dictionary, and then inside there, the key names are going to be the things that I have access to inside my template. So let's say I'm just going to pass in a first name, pass in my first name, and then the way we give that to the template so that the template can render it is by passing it as the third argument. So I'm going to pass this context dictionary as the third argument here. Okay? And now the way that we can actually output this inside our template is going to be exactly the same as we did it in Flask. You guys remember how we output something to the template? Double mustache tags. Yeah, we'll do the exact same thing. So if instead of hi Django, I wanted to say hi first name, all I have to do is go like this. Okay? And then let's refresh it. So now it's showing my name. Okay? So let's take one more look at that. Here in my views.py, I created this context dictionary. I set a key of first name to have a value of my name. And then I pass that context variable as the third argument of this render function. Okay? Any questions about that? You guys good on that? All right.
Views.py it's the same as the file we had in Flask server.py.
Sort of. It doesn't have some things in it, right? We don't have the actual URL patterns here, our routing part. That routing has now been moved over to our urls.py. So it's been a little bit more modularized. But otherwise, yeah, it's quite similar. Good. All right, cool. So what if I want to take some input from my user? How do we usually do that? Create some kind of a form, right? All right, so let's create a form. My action, do you guys remember what the action means? Does anybody remember what action is?
Post, get,
No, that's the method.
Oh, okay.
What's the action?
And the under
The route.
There we go. Yeah, so our action is just saying where do we want this request to be sent to? Okay? All right. So let's say I just want, I don't know. I'm just going to create a route called process form. All right. And then we'll change the method here because most of the time you guys are going to be using a post method. Now inside here, let's just create a input group. I don't know. First name. Okay, and then let's just create a little button to actually submit the form. All right. Now, do I have a route called process form yet? No. So I've got to create that, right? If I go back to my urls.py, let's create that as a new URL pattern. So I'll add this here. We'll say path. Actually, I'll put it on top. Path is going to be, and this is kind of tricky because notice how I don't have a trailing or a slash in front of it. In Flask, you did. Okay, just something to note. However, I am adding a trailing slash to the end of it. Okay. Now, do I have a function to process the form yet? Haven't built one yet, right? So let's just say we're going to create one. We'll call it views.process. Trying to see if I'll get a squiggly. Oh, it's not doing it. So sometimes what you'll see is in your editor, it's going to give you like a squiggly line on this saying this function doesn't exist yet. And that's pretty helpful. Then you know, okay, I haven't written it yet. So let's go back to our views.py and let's create this process function. Okay, def process. Again, we always need to take in the request. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out what came through the form. All right. So how would we do that with Flask? Anybody remember? Request that form. So this time it's going to be a little different. We're going to print out request.post. And notice that it's all caps like that. Okay? So this is the actual post data that's coming in from the form. And then usually what I want to do after I've done something with some form submission or whatever, like later on we're gonna be putting this stuff in the database, assuming that it meets our criteria. But for now, let's just redirect the user, right? Do I have a function called redirect here anywhere? Not right now, right? So we may want to import that as well. So that's nice. We don't need to actually write this function. And then let's just return redirect to that index route. Okay. So let's go back to our page. Whoa. What happened to my server? Oh, you know what? It actually killed my server because I didn't have that process function. Right? So keep an eye on your terminal sometimes. If something kills the process, you'll need to restart the server. Okay, so we're running again. Let me refresh the page. Cool, I've got this first name form. Now let's submit something here. Bob. Oh no. Man, what happened here? Forbidden. All right, so when we're using forms inside Django, we actually need to provide this CSRF token. Does anyone know what that stands for? No.
Certified security.
Certified? That was a good guess. No, it's cross-site request forgery. So in other words, what the purpose of this whole token is, let's make sure that this request came from this website, didn't get generated somewhere else. All right. So the way that we include that in Django, and you're going to have to include this in every form that you guys are doing, is like this. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to use my curly brace followed by a %, and I'll just say CSRF underscore token like this. All right. Now we'll go back to the form page and see what that looks like. Refresh it. Okay, now I'm just going to view the page source. So what's this thing right here? This input type equals hidden.
Assume that's your code. Yeah.
So what does that mean if an input is hidden?
That means you want to take this value, but you don't want your client to see it.
Correct. We want the input to be there, but we just want it to be invisible, right? Did you have a question, Max? No? Just that? Okay. Cool. And then notice it has this name, CSRF middleware token. So that's going to enable our Django server to actually determine, yes, this request came from our web application. Okay? So now that we have that there, let me go ahead and try this one more time, Bob. Okay? We got back to our index, so it sort of looked like nothing happened, right? But something should have happened in my terminal because I was trying to print out what the form input was. Okay, whoops. Gosh, this hot reloading is kind of going crazy. CSRF cookie not set? What? There we go. Okay, so here I was able to, I'm going to try to keep this from moving. So here I've got this query dict. So it's a dictionary that has all of the form data that came back, right? And you can see here we've got this CSRF middleware token. That was the token that Django created for us, just to ensure this request came from our website. And then the other thing that we had here was the first name, and that's set to Bob. Okay. So what if I just wanted to print out the first name? I could do it like this. I could say request.post first name. That should allow me to do that. So let me refresh that. Jessica, you're here. Let's do that. Gosh, it's kind of hard to see your. Oh, here we are. Where's the actual? Oh, there's Jessica. Okay, God, it's hard to find her. Because see, the app is like constantly reloading, so it's sort of a little bit hard to track your printing in the back end. But here, I just printed the first name. That's all. So I said request.post, and then in brackets first name, because that was the key that I was interested in. Okay. All right. Are you guys interested in seeing how to load up static files on your projects? Like if you wanted to have a CSS file or something like that? Yeah? All right.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, sure.
So the return redirect,
Mhm.
the slash, so you wouldn't put it, like if you're referring to your index page, like, or whatever, right, in your URLs one, you wouldn't put the slash, but you would just put, wait. 'Cause
Yeah, it is a little confusing. So inside of our urls.py, we don't need the preceding slash. But if I'm doing a redirect, I do need to specify that. So we're just going to specify slash to go back to that index route. That's a good question. All right, so let's talk about how we can load some static files. So let's say we had maybe a CSS file or a JavaScript file or some images, something like that. I can create a static folder inside this main folder, just like we did with our Flask app. Okay, so I'm going to create this folder called static. And then inside there, let's create maybe a subfolder for CSS files. Yeah.
Can we create a subfolder for the template? Do we not?
No, yeah, that's changing. So yeah, slight difference from how things used to be. We're trying to make it a little bit less convoluted. Is ultimately what's happening there. Okay, so I'm creating this style.css. I'm going to do something that's kind of obvious. We'll just say the body, background, light blue. Cool. And then in my actual template, this is where I'm going to attempt to load this CSS file. So I'm going to go up here inside my head, and I'm going to do load static. Okay? So what that's telling Django is that after this point in my code, so after line 8, I'm going to load up some static files, whether it be a CSS file or a JavaScript file or whatever. Right? Now, do you guys remember how to link a style sheet inside HTML? Link. So it'll say rel equals style sheet, and then the href is going to be where is that style sheet located. So rather than just hard coding some kind of a path, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say static, and then I need to say the name of the file. So the name of this file was going to be css/style.css. And then I need to close that out again with this right here. Okay, so let's see if we can get that to load up. Apparently we didn't. Second network. Yeah, let me try a hard refresh real quick. Head. Huh. Without which slash were you saying?
Do you have to put that quotation on static?
No, shouldn't have to. That should be fine. Say that again.
Do you define a class for the body
No, so I mean the problem right now is that we simply weren't loading this style sheet at all. Because I was checking here, if you look in the network tab of your browser, notice, oh shoot, let me just close this out real quick. Notice here that it's saying it tried to retrieve this style.css file, but it failed. So something went wrong, right? We got a 404 not found, which is not what we were expecting. We were expecting to actually get that style sheet. So we're loading static files. Let me just double check the docs here because that seems weird. Static URL is like that. Isn't this exactly what we did? Can you guys see that okay? Store your static files in a folder called static in your app. Okay. You mean is our static folder inside the app? It was, right? So it's like main static CSS style.css. Hmm.
Static is collect mark with the static point.
You say you just can't find that. So it has to be something.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I'm looking at it. It looks all right to me. Something look wrong to you guys?
Yeah, we have the same problem.
Is it because
In Flask?
Yeah.
Is it because the index is stored in a sister folder? You would have to like actually go back up so you can actually go to static,
Mm,
right?
I mean, it's an interesting idea, but I don't feel like that's the issue in this case. Because notice how, I mean, obviously in the docs, they're giving you an example where you'd be using a template, just like we are, right?
Okay, the HTML, like the network response to see like what's the actual value it's using.
So yeah, what it was using was /static /css /style.css. And that should be correct, because if you look inside your settings, let me see, static. So there's a static URL. It's just saying that the file. This is the file path that would come before any static files, right? Anyway, I don't want to use up a whole bunch of time on this though because it's not critical. So let me look into it and then I'll just let you guys know. All right. Cool. Any questions on the other stuff that we did though, as far as just kind of like getting a page up and running? Including that CSRF token whenever we do form submissions, very important.
So do we have to do the CRF token for each form we have?
For
or
every single form,
every
yeah.
single form?
You always need to include that inside. Otherwise, you'll get that sort of yellow screen of death that we saw there, saying you didn't include that CSRF token.
So I guess I'm just trying to understand like how did they structure the framework so I can conceptually understand why these placeholder concepts exist.
Sure. Which placeholder concepts are you referencing, though?
So let's specifically go over them because it's like so you have your URLs which defines like the endpoints.
In the application, right?
Right.
So these guys right here. Yeah.
I'm guessing test is you have your unit tests from.
Right.
Sure. Model like stores some reference schema information that you're trying to communicate with the database.
Yeah, and again, we'll get into this later, so I don't want you to worry about it just yet. Yeah.
Then and then like a Django is a project, you have multiple sure.
Right.
But then like views views as a concept is still easier.
Right,
What
right.
exactly would be a view?
So a view is basically inside this views.py file. That's where we have all of the functions that are going to handle specific URL patterns for us. They're also in other frameworks. You guys might have heard of something called MVC, Model Views and Controllers. Django has this concept of MTV, which is models, templates, and views. So the templates are exactly what you'd expect. Those are the actual HTML templates that we're using. The views are just basically the logic for what do we want to do before we render that view. Okay, so we might want to, later on, we're going to be pulling some stuff from the database. We'll also be putting some things into the database, that kind of thing. So the views are basically all of our logic. And then the template is the thing that the end user is going to see. Right?
Okay, that makes sense.
And then again, the models is just only concerned with data.
Right. I guess like the way I'm, because conceptually the only time I'm really exposed to from the view is from a database perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just trying to relay it from a framework perspective of what views represent. And it kind of makes sense that you're saying that that's where your logic resides, in which you have your
Right.
bare bones functions at its core, which is URLs. These are the things. And then if you want to do some other logical steps with these things, these are your views.
That's going to happen in the views.py.
Which makes sense.
Mhm. Excellent. Cool. I know this is a lot to take in, and Django is going to be kind of a tough thing in the beginning. Just realize that it gets a little bit easier to set up the projects as you do it a few times. And that's, again, one of the reasons why it's so important to go through a lot of these assignments, because it's like the first couple times, you're not really understanding how the whole thing fits together. But after you've done it 3 times or so, it'll make a little more sense, and the process will get a little bit easier. All right, so just hang tough. You know, in the beginning, it's kind of frustrating. Any other final questions before I dismiss you guys?
Is the belt exam based on Django or Flask?
It'll be based on Django. Because, again, we didn't do anything in Flask with data.
Right.
So it used to be that the course had a data component for Flask. It no longer does. That's now an optional thing. So Flask with MySQL. Test will be in Django. All right. Any other questions?
We have class in 2.
Hmm?
We have lecture in 2.
Oh, this afternoon? No, I wasn't planning to do anything this afternoon. However, if you guys have like a specific assignment or something that's throwing you guys off, just let me know. I mean, I'm definitely open to requests. If you have something you want to see in the afternoon, we could do that. All right? Cool.